Coming this August, the magic returns one last time. It's Luminosity Reimagined. The Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra and your Cincinnati Pops take the 3D visual spectacular indoors to fill the historic Taft Theater with light and music. A fantastic journey for the whole community. Luminosity Reimagined. Live, on air, and online.
I listen to flows, like I said, I like how people put together what they're saying the most over the top of the beat. Cause it's like the beat has its rhythm, but then the rapper has his own rhythm as well. But the thing is, he has to coexist that within that rhythm that's already laid down. So that's where you find your flow, how you can just play with words.
And basically we're using heat and steam to relax the wood and make it to where we can bend it into a shape that we like. The types of wood that I like to use are pretty standard in the industry. Honduras mahogany, Brazilian rosewood, American walnut, American maple. Those are pretty much the standards. Some of them are getting a little harder to obtain. And the reason we like to use those woods for two reasons. One, they are what the instruments we grew up hearing are made out of. The songs that we like to hear are usually made out of those types of wood, so our brain is naturally kind of drawn to that. And the first time I string up a guitar that I build and I give that first pluck and hear that first note, it's definitely an excitement. You've reached a point in the instrument where you can finally see the end. When building an instrument, each step gets harder and the chance of messing something up gets greater. So when you get to the point where you're actually putting strings on it, you finally achieve something and you have a big relief, and you're also very excited. You're hearing something for the first time that you've created. And that personal connection between the client, the guitar, and the builder, it's a very special connection. You've worked with that client, you've gotten to know them, so you're on the same page with them as far as the build goes. And then in the end, when they have received that instrument and they're able to perform with it and make it a tool, make an extension of them, that's a very exciting part for me. You've spent your time creating something and you've given that to somebody, and that person has spent time learning how to play it, and they've taken that instrument and created something very special.
I really like to use regular women, and so using these techniques of just having people relax their jaw, or breathing in a certain way, or even just distracting them from the camera and getting them to be more in their body or in their mind, as opposed to noticing, you know, all this external equipment that is unusual. Yeah.
See if you can, I'm gonna demonstrate. So, okay, so I'm seeing a lot of like square hearts. See if you can push on that thumb.
I want clients to leave a session feeling as though they had a great time. They're confident that their images are going to be everything they wanted and hopefully more. And that maybe they've explored a part of themselves or shown a part of themselves that they've never seen or shown before. I feel like I've just scratched the surface of photography. However, when I go back and look at things I did years ago, I can clearly see improvement. I can clearly see development, more ease with subjects, and better compositions. But it's still this vast field that I'm just beginning to explore, and I'm so excited to see where it's going to take me.
Hi, I'm Barbara Keller, and welcome to Showcase. On today's episode, we have Oscar Robertson, Eddie Kwan, and Ryan Fine and the Media. Don't change that channel. Showcase is coming up next. Oscar, thank you for coming. This is so exciting. I couldn't wait for you to get here. I know you're an old veteran of this sort of thing, but for our audience, this is Oscar Robertson, who was recently voted the Basketball Collegiate of the Century. What organization gives that award?
That's the National Association of Basketball Coaches. I got that from them.
The coaches.
Yes, that's
well,
correct.
that's not even the fans who can be prejudiced.
No, well, no, not fans. No, they didn't do that for me. The fans didn't, but I got it from the coaches, which was a great honor. I certainly appreciated that.
Mm-hmm. And we have several things we want to talk about today, but
delicious, creamy, almost kind of sauce in its own right? And it's sweet, but it's full of flavor. But then you take that same parsnip and maybe you roast it. And then you take the same parsnip and you slice it real thin and deep fry it. And all of a sudden you have 3 different textures, but also 3 very distinct flavors of that same vegetable. And that's always a good way to highlight an ingredient and showcase it in a few different ways.
Jose Salazar and I have been working together for about 2.5 years. He likes to play with textures and using ingredients in multiple different ways. On the national level, we've been nominated semi-finalists for the James Beard Foundation the past 2 years. Here locally, we've been named in the top 10 of the Cincinnati Magazine. It's a blessing to get a chance to work that closely with someone who is being recognized on a national level.
The team's everything. I think that they respect me and know that I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and do just about anything it takes to get the job done. I'm really nothing without them, and that sounds cliche, but it's a reality. We just got some beautiful lamb in from a farm in Kentucky, and really are focusing on how can we use every part of the animal in different and interesting ways. I'm thinking I want to do empanadas with the lamb neck. So we're gonna braise the lamb neck and do a really nice baked empanada in a kind of a puff pastry crust. And maybe a sauce with a little bit of ginger and herbs and something that plays off the slight gaminess of the lamb. I love the way our menu's structured. I really do. Now it feels more cohesive. It fits with the overall theme of the restaurant. And the guests have really loved it.
There are very few places where you can have a tapas experience of authentic Spanish cheese, meat, paella. It's one of the only options in the city, and it's top notch.
I started working in restaurants when I was about 18 because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I thought, okay, I'll work in restaurants for a little bit until I figure it out. Ultimately, I found myself kind of cooking at home and wanting to explore foods, and again, I didn't grow up eating or going out to experience gastronomy necessarily, but it just took hold, and I said, all right, this is kind of it. And so it's more of a sense. I don't know that you can really say I do it for this or that, other than you end up falling in love with it.
A lot of the work we do is involving taxidermy, and obviously that's the sort of thing that you're not going to find at an art store. So the supplying of that work, a lot of it is coming from the road. So taxidermy, I guess, is movable skin is what it literally translates to. And what it is it's an art form in which you're removing the skin from an animal and replacing the inside with a form, a sculpture. When I was much younger, actually the reason I even moved to Cincinnati was to go into art school, and I had a lot of designs on becoming a medical illustrator. I had all these skins, because you got to be really, really delicate when you're doing dissection. And eventually I figured out that I should probably go ahead and use those in the artwork in some way. Instead of just doing 2D, go to the 3D. So I moved on to taxidermy really from a medical illustration perspective. What we do is yeah, we do ethically sourced things. The things that we're not doing is we're not going out and hunting. The work that I'm doing it has a lot of gallows humor in it. There is a lot of comedy in a lot of these pieces. A lot of the mounts in the taxidermy I make are intended to be viewed as either intentionally kinetic or intentionally static. So like bone articulations and things like that, they're meant to move and teach people, so you can see how muscles are intended to move and how bones articulate with one another. But in many ways, that comedy or that sometimes the grotesqueness of it is intended to really disarm people, as open up a gateway, in a sense, to nature itself. One of the things that gets asked a lot of me is how can you stand all the blood and things like that, like all the gore of it. It really isn't actually that messy or gory. It actually is a very technical trade. So first, there is the skinning process. So that means removing the skin from the body. From that, then there's a salting process, which everything has to be dehydrated, and there's a lot of sciencey stuff in there. It's not really necessary, but the salt basically dehydrates the skin from the inside rather than having a forced dry coat on the surface of the skin. We take all the fat and other layers of skin and stuff like that on the inside that need to be removed for a good tan. So that's at the point in which you're chemically changing the skin. I think the anatomy is critically important with all the work I do. And I think finding those comparisons between animals and humans is really eye-opening. And if I'm altering the anatomy, then it has to be believable. We don't actually use pre-sculpted mannequins. But since we're doing a lot more artistically based stuff, we make all of it ourselves. A lot of the stuff we use for raccoons and things like that are actually just blown glass, black bubbles. Well, these are the actual teeth, but then a two-part epoxy clay. So if we were to do something, actually it would make sense. If we were to do something that's a resin cast, then I would use a mold. The teeth are fit directly to this sculpture. The uppers will just fall out if I put them there, but they fit in there too. I think the most rewarding part of all of it is a deeper understanding in nature, biology, and anatomy and physiology. Like when I think about the most, energetic times that I've had, it's been when something is discovered that just wasn't expected.
In the music hall renovation, there are a few forgotten, out-of-the-way spaces, rooms without a budget code. They may never become grand, but with more imagination than money, they can be transformed.
We are in one of the two towers on the front of Music Hall, and of all uses for this space, these are bathrooms. The design was never intended to change these spaces, but during demolition, we started to take out the acoustic ceiling that was in the space, and we saw the windows that were up above, and saw the volume of the space that was up above. And Alan and I were walking through, and we were just saying, we cannot put that ceiling back in. First of all, once you take out a ceiling, you certainly get the volume back, but you also get all the stuff that ceiling hid. So we had to cleverly get rid of all of that.
And then that black, that's the original wall, including the arch, and that corner right there would go black.
All black.
Yeah.
The concept in the end was just draw a line where the ceiling was, finish everything below that well, new and fresh, and above that line, paint it out, let it disappear. I think what we did here was take what we were given and make it into something that nobody imagined. It is a simple bathroom space, but still, it's more than that.
The music hall renovation is wrapped in multiple layers of complexity. Beyond satisfying the 5 resident companies, the design also has to satisfy the patrons of those arts.
Our philosophy for approaching this kind of redevelopment is to create a space that's responsive to contemporary audiences without losing the history of the venue.
The renovation got to the bottom of the most persistent audience complaint.
Number one complaint we've always gotten from audience members, this is nothing new, this complaint's been coming in for decades, legroom. It's comfort of the seats.
The new seats are wider and more comfortable.
You'll be able to sit down and your feet won't go numb from the lack of space within 5 minutes, or you won't feel like you're taking your life in your hands walking down the steps in the balcony. I think people will appreciate what's been done.
Climate control was another problem in Springer Auditorium.
Depending on where you sat, the air conditioning systems might be blowing cold air in one area and other areas of the theater would be too warm.
The new system is state-of-the-art, designed to deliver evenly dispersed heating and cooling. And while enhancing the acoustics is a primary objective, so is improving the sightlines.
We've been asked to do a lot of 3D visualization on this job. The 3D visualization gives you a terrific advantage that we didn't have years ago, where you can virtually pick any seat in the house and create a 3D visualization of what that sight line is going to be. Given the fact that this project involves re-raking of the floors throughout the house and modifying the shape of the house, improving the sight lines was a big deal.
High-capacity elevators, improved concessions, more restrooms, and an audience lounge are among the changes designed to enhance the audience experience. But there are several behind-the-scenes changes designed to make Music Hall a better home for the arts.
They put in a whole second floor in the North Hall for a rehearsal hall. So they've made the building so much more practical and usable for arts organizations.
Performance centers are very demanding, and the flow of traffic through the back of house areas that the public never sees is actually incredibly critical to the success of the shows.
I'll give you a classic example, and this is behind the stage and to the side of the stage. There were floor level changes, significant floor level changes, that were a real thorn for the companies, going up and down stairs. And it was a difficult decision, an expensive decision, to lower all these crossover spaces in the theater, but we went ahead and did it. And we dramatically improved the functionality for the resident companies to put on productions.
Even well-intentioned change is still change, and that makes some people uncomfortable.
I always tell people that Music Hall is a working theater. We're not a museum. And to understand that the changes that are being made, yes, certainly will represent many things that are new. But In saying that, it's not to take away from the character of the building or the way that Cincinnatians have experienced it for over 130 years.
The fact of the matter is that we literally had to rebuild the entire Springer Auditorium to be able to achieve the size reduction that was required by the acousticians for the symphony and to create sight lines that would work for all of the different disciplines. So the massive changes were made to that room, and yet I feel as though we've been able to retain the heart and soul that Springer Auditorium was.
Designed to enhance the acoustics, the structural changes to Springer Hall are complete. But the process of tuning the room continues.
It can involve anything from adjustments to the acoustic canopy over the stage. Those are the glass and steel elements that are suspended from the ceiling of the hall over the performance platform.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay, lock it down.
To how the orchestra is seated in the riser system on the stage, to maybe subtle adjustments to materials on wall surfaces or on the orchestra shell. These are all strategies and techniques that we can apply to kind of fine-tune the edges.
The canopy is designed and constructed specifically for Music Hall. Each unit can be individually raised and lowered with laser-guided precision.
At one point, we as a team thought, well, why don't we try raising the canopy about 3 inches in the front? So we did that. It was not the right move.
Well, we'll be experimenting.
Everybody thought, oh, okay, 3 inches makes a pretty big difference in this case. Let's take that back. And I just never would have considered that such a small change would make such a dramatic impact on our acoustical experience in the hall.
For the acoustics team, there are no issues too small to factor into the equation. They even advise on the amount of padding in the seats.
We're working closely with the mechanical engineers to design the new ventilation systems so that they're quiet and they don't intrude on the performance. We had to allow the air in the shaft to run at a faster level, which produces more noise, but then figure out a way to slow it down at the bottom of the shaft to make sure that when it got to the auditorium, it was still quiet. So that's a good example of a field condition that you run into in a place like Music Hall.
This has been a really interesting process for me, learning about the science of acoustics, but something I've come to appreciate above all else is that there comes a point at which you just have to say, oh, okay, this is the space. Now how are we gonna play? How are we gonna make this sound great?
And that leads to an interesting revelation. The room itself actually functions much like a musical instrument.
And just like any instrument, it has its strengths, it has its weaknesses, it has its quirks, it has its prominent elements. And the musicians of the orchestra and the music director need to discover what those qualities are and learn how to play them to best advantage.
And actually, when you played the last time the Bruckner thing, that was really special.
We are discovering some greatness within our orchestra that we weren't always expressing because of the realities of playing in Music Hall. And I know that we would have had to play with a lot more force before, and now we can whisper, and that can be heard.
And that's such an exciting moment in music, because as the orchestra gets quieter and quieter, the audience will actually hold its breath and lean in ever so slightly to catch those last glimmers of sound before they disappear. So that's one measure of success is seeing the orchestra be able to achieve things that they couldn't achieve before.
And that opens up a world of possibilities in terms of dynamics and expression and color and texture. It's really, really fun. It's challenging, but really fun and rewarding to play that way, to explore the whole palette.
One of the most rewarding aspects of what we do is getting to work closely with wonderful musicians like Maestro Louis Langret. And one of the things that you discover about Maestro Langret when you start to work with him is his tremendous passion for the music and his drive for excellence that made it a real pleasure to work with him. Music Hall was built in 1878 and has been beloved by this community for a long, long time. You have to be tremendously respectful of that.
As fall approaches, the days seem to move faster. Inside the building, there's a sense of both excitement and tension.
Here we are racing towards October.
We need to be unflappable because we can't let something throw us off track. And I try to keep an even keel, but I don't always do that.
We've got to continue to focus on progress all the way until the end.
For the Messer team, it's been a long journey.
I attempted to leave work at the office. However, with this project, it doesn't always work out that way. I find myself making phone calls at 8 o'clock at night, checking my email at 10 o'clock at night, waking up in the middle of the night and thinking about something and sending email just because I'm afraid that if I don't, I fall back asleep, I'll forget it.
There have been times, where you get calls or whatever from work or somebody needs something and you'll answer it if you can, and then there's times you need to let it go to voicemail.
You can be out mowing the lawn and all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, I need to do this for next week or this schedule, things just hit you. You're always thinking about it. But that's what I thrive on. I know that's what Mike Hess thrives on. I know that's what Tom Stevens, that's what all of us thrive on, is those challenges.
With the changing of the season, also came a changing of the guard.
You become so acquainted with every detail, every nuance, every bit of the project that you've fretted through and you've tried to figure out solutions for and hoped and prayed that you were, again, making things better. When I walk onto the job site, I am able to go anywhere I want. However, as we come to the time where we are now, literally weeks away from opening the house, an interesting transformation takes place. What I consider to be my project, my building, that perception changes very quickly as the companies begin to move into the buildings and they start commissioning the different parts of it. They begin to take over the operations of the building. Their people are in charge in the building, and I walk up to the front door, and instead of just being able to walk through the front door and go wherever I want, there's a person standing there and saying, well, who are you? And I have to say, that's a humbling moment. But as bittersweet as it sometimes feels, it's also a very proud moment. It's a very important moment because I realize the community is now taking its treasure back.
An African Safari for Two. Donor, Zulu Nyala. Zulu Nyala is the ideal place to delight in exciting game viewing activity, as well as to relax. You can have the thrill of a lifetime as you experience an up-close viewing of some of the most spectacular wildlife on the planet. A tantalizing taste of the wild in the heart of Africa's richest conservation region, situated in Zululand, South Africa. Experience elephant, rhino, leopard, giraffe, hippo, zebra, nyala, buffalo, kudu, and many more. Stay at either Zulu Nyala Heritage Safari Lodge, where warm hospitality meets old colonial grace, or the Zulu Nyala Tented Safari Camp, with Hemingway-style tents that evoke echoes of a bygone era. Either is sure to be a pleasure. This package includes luxury accommodations for two for 6 days and 6 nights, 3 delicious meals per day, prepared by the finest international chefs, with an African flavor, of course, 2 game viewing activities per day, guided by a professional game ranger and open game viewing vehicles in Zulu Nalia Game Reserve. This package does not include airfare, transfers, side trips, personal beverages, or phone calls. The certificate does not expire. Donor value $5,950.